In late July, we set out for a 3-week adventure through Africa. Ben was in charge of driving, Bill was in charge of photography, and I was in charge of navigation. Using a really neat app called Motion X GPS, I was able to keep track of our path through Africa to an accuracy of about 15 feet. I made this movie to bring together the GPS data, which I've imported into Google Earth, with a small subset of the photos we took at various places along the way. So here's Google Earth. Our journey started in Atlanta, Georgia, where we all met to board our international flight to Africa. It's a 15-hour flight. These red tracks represent the entire journey, the GPS data for the entire journey. We started in Johannesburg, South Africa. We got in a little late, so we ended up just spending the night at the City Lodge Hotel, which was right in the airport. Of course, Ben and I immediately hopped on our iPads to see if there was Wi-Fi, and the quest for Wi-Fi was something that was continuing throughout the journey, and we were actually pretty successful at finding Wi-Fi whenever we could. And we had dinner that night at the City Lodge restaurant. Ben is holding a Windhoek beer, a brand of beer that we became quite familiar with on this journey. It's all throughout Africa, at least South Africa, and Namibia and Botswana, where we were. We eventually ended up in the town of Windhoek, where this beer gets its name, in Namibia. But our real journey began the next day, July 26th, when we took our flight from Johannesburg to Victoria Falls Airport in Zimbabwe. It's a small airport. Here we are at the airport, and we had to go through customs there and actually buy a visa. It's a nice looking visa, but we were a little bummed that we had to pay something to get into the country. It was the only place we had to do that. And outside of the airport, we met our guide who was going to take us to the lodge that we were going to stay at, but we convinced him that it would be a good idea to go to Victoria Falls first and take a tour of that. So from the airport, we drove to the Victoria Falls Hotel, which is a really, really beautiful hotel in Victoria Falls. And it's here that we had to buy the tickets in order to get into the park where the falls were. So this is Victoria Falls Hotel, and you can't really tell from this picture because those people are in the way, but you're able to walk sort of straight through that doorway and then down into this really pretty courtyard, and then continuing on through to the outside there to this back area. And you can see in the distance there, if I get a little bit closer, you can see the Victoria Falls Bridge there and the mist that's coming up from the falls itself. So it's a really great view from the back of the hotel. And here on the satellite you can see this line here, this track, is that path that sort of goes through that center courtyard and then out the back, and then this circular area here is where you can look out over the falls. Okay, well then after we got our tickets, we drove to Victoria Falls, and we started off up here in the upper left at this spot. You can see there's kind of a small waterfall right here that it looks like its own contained waterfall because we were there in between the dry season and the wet season, and so there was not as much water coming over the falls as it would be during the wet season, so you had these kind of isolated sort of waterfalls. You can also see this circular area here with that little dot, and what that is a statue of Livingstone, and he's the white guy that gets credit for discovering the falls, even though of course all the Africans knew the falls were there, but this is the guy that gets the statue. And this is that little fall that's sort of at the very end, sort of disconnected from the rest because it's a little bit more towards the dry season. And from this location you can look down sort of edgewise the fall and just see the most spectacular views of the falls with the mist and the rainbows everywhere. It was really, really beautiful. So now we're walking along the edge of the fall. You can see here on our track that we're walking along here, seeing the falls as we go, and we end up at this spot where there's a pool here, and then this yellow line is actually the border between Zimbabwe and Zambia. So part of the falls are in Zambia. Here we are all. You can see we all are. You can see that it's getting quite misty. It got a little bit more misty as we got down there, and we all have raincoats that we were able to put on. But I think I'm the only one to actually put one on, but it did get kind of wet. There's really a perfect amount of water coming over the falls, because if it's too much you can't really see anything because it's just a huge wall of mist. So now you know what's at the end of the rainbow, Bill. So across the gorge here is actually Zambia, and if you look, zoom in here, you can see people walking over on that side, just to give you a sense of the scale here. This is the path walking back now to the vehicle, and there were some warthogs there. That was one of the first exposure we had to the animals. And a neat looking bird. I don't really know that much about the birds, so Ben will have to fill you in. He's the expert on birds. Okay, and then from Victoria Falls we got back with our guide in that vehicle, and he drove us on a rather long drive, about 45 miles or so, to the border, the Zimbabwe-Botswana border. So now we're going to pass into Botswana, where we're going to spend a significant amount of time. This is the border post. Welcome to Botswana. And when we walked over the border, we left our guide there and picked up a new guide with a new vehicle that would take us to the Kubu Lodge, which is where we stayed that second night. Kubu Lodge is right on the Chobe River. If I zoom out a little bit here, you can see the river. And the lodge was really nice. It had this grassy area that you can see there, and you could walk down to the river, and it's really a pretty place. So here are the cabins. Ben and I stayed in one, and Bill had the other one, and they had these balconies and a little table out there. It was really nice. These are the beds with the mosquito nets, which I always think is really neat. For some reason I got the really nice double bed, and Ben slept over there in the corner. And this is looking up from that grassy area to the lodge where we had our meals. We had dinner there that night and breakfast there the next morning. And we were able to see a really nice sunset over the Chobe River that night as well. Okay, so the next morning, day 3, July 27th, this is what our track consisted of, going from Kubu Lodge to our next campsite in Ihaha. But we started off back at the lodge here. The nice breakfast there out on the balcony overlooking the Chobe River. This is what it looked like, really pretty. It was part of the breakfast we had. It was delightful. We were joined by these two bird brains. And then breakfast was actually interrupted by Lucas here, and he was the man who gave us our vehicle, which was going to be our home for the next couple of weeks, and showed us all the equipment and how everything worked and how to set up the tents, etc. It's a really neat vehicle. There's Ben, he's going to be the driver. The two tents are on top there. The vehicle worked out really well. Never got a flat tire, never had any mechanical problems. So we were happy with that. It was a gas guzzler though. And after we got the vehicle all checked out, we got on this little bus and were driven to upstream a little bit on the river, and we went on this really neat river cruise. Oops. So here we are walking down to the boats that we were going to use for the river cruise. And you can see where that is. And we drove with that small little minibus to this spot, and you can see the boats there in the water, the dock. That's where we got where we boarded. And then this circular path in the river around this island is where we went on our river cruise. So you can see that we sort of just circumnavigated this this island, and we saw so much wildlife on this trip, and we were just really impressed with that. So let's look at some of those pictures. A beautiful bird. Again, I don't really know the names of the birds so much, but there was a lot of variety. Big hippo. We saw a lot of hippos. There's an eagle, lizard, buffalo. So many elephants you cannot even imagine. Bill's been to Africa many times and remarked on, I just never have seen this many elephants in one spot. So that was really a pleasure. Crocodiles. We saw at least 15 crocodiles, and we're able to get really close to them because of our mode of transportation, in the boat. There's Ben in the boat. There were only 4 other people on the boat with us, so it was a nice small boat, good size. There's some kudu, female kudu and a young male kudu there to the left. They grow up to look like this with those really neat horns, the male kudu. This guy was cooperative in opening up his mouth for us and showing us his big teeth. But we really were able to get that close. They didn't seem to really mind us. If they did, they just swam into the water. But here's a view of another boat, just to give you an idea of what ours looked like as well. That's a kingfisher hovering. Really neat how still they can keep themselves, and then they dive down into the water to get a tasty morsel. So these elephants sort of ran down from up in the bush there down to the water, and they all waited there for a long time for them to make their move across the river to get to that island. This little guy actually is the one that made the first move, and then everyone else seemed to follow. But here they are trekking across. The little guy went completely underwater. You can see he's all wet there. And then here they are coming out on the other side. And then everyone got in the game. This guy took a bath. And then they all came across. And that was really, really neat to see. And here we are at the end of the boat cruise, getting off the boats. And from there, we were driven back to the Kubu Lodge so that we can get our vehicle. And we first thing we did is we got in the vehicle and we went just a short drive down the end of the road there to this little place. And by the way, when all you see there's some crazy red lines all over the place, that's usually because if you stay in one spot, the GPS sort of freaks out a little bit, and so it records you sort of getting all crazy when you're just sitting there. But we went to this place here, which was called Mario's Meats. Mario's Meat Market, and that's where we stocked up on some supplies. That looks like Gabe so much, but it's not Gabe. She wasn't with us. We bought, you could see the packages of vacuum sealed sausage, steak, barbecue chicken. So we got all that to cook at our campsite for the next week or so. Okay, after Mario's Meats, we went to driving back sort of the same way we went before to go to the river cruise, but we stopped here at the Spar supermarket to stock up on more supplies that we would need for the next week of camping. Food, water, snacks, things like that. This is in Kasane, the city that's close to the river there. Then we drove to the Chobe Sadudu Gate, which is the gate into Chobe the park. That's the gate there. And then once we entered the park, we did a game drive along the river. So this path here is the game drive that we did, and you can see the river. That yellow line is the border with Namibia. And along the way, we saw, again, lots of elephants. This guy's kind of taking a dirt bath. There's a baboon, giraffe in this really awkward position. It's easy for them to get leaves that are really high up in the trees, but a little bit more difficult for them to get things that are low on the ground like water, and so they have to get into these awkward poses. The giraffes are just really incredible animals. I love them. They look so awkward and graceful at the same time. Another really pretty bird. Hippo. This guy got really close enough that we could really see his whiskers coming out of his face, which is really strange. Another baboon. Some pretty zebra. And so those are some of the animals that we saw on the way. Similar animals to our river cruise, because we're going right along the river there as well. But we ended up in our campsite, which was the Ihaha camp, right on the river. That's where we camped. And set up our, for the first time, we set up our rooftop tents, which is a really neat system where you just unfold this and it all pops up and have these ladders hanging down. It's pretty cool. And here we are getting ready for dinner. Very civilized. You can see Bill has his wine there with his metal wine glass. And we had a good meal that night, cooked over open fire. And we're treated to a beautiful sunset over the Chobe River as well. Okay, so the next day, day 4, July 28th, this was our track for that day. We basically backtracked all the way to Kasane, doing another game drive all along the river, which takes hours and hours as you drive and stop and see animals, etc. But our day started back at camp. We had a nice breakfast there. Here we are in the morning getting ready. It's a little chilly. You can see we have coats on. There's Bill cooking some toast for us over the propane heater, the propane fire. And that's what the vehicle looks like when it's all packed up and ready to go on the game drive. So some of the animals we saw along the way. We saw some more buffalo. We did see some lions huddled underneath a bush there. That was the most active they were. The rest of the time they were doing this. And that's the thing about lions, is you're really eager to see them, but then they oftentimes disappoint in that they just sort of lay there and sleep all day. But we did see some. Then we ended up at this place, the PPCC, Pizza Plus Coffee and Curry restaurant, for lunch. So where was that? That was, this is our game drive. And we kept going until we got back into the city, into Kasane. And this is where we had lunch at the PPCC. It was good. I had actually Indian food, which was tasty. And on the way back, we went to another supermarket, different one this time, Choppies. Did some shopping there to get some additional things that we realized we were missing, like just like a bucket to wash the dishes in and some bleach, that sort of thing. But on the way back to camp, of course, we did a third game drive along the river there. And here are some of the pictures from that. More elephants sort of making their way into the water. We waited there a long time to see if they would cross over to get to the other side, but they were nervous, I think, about us being there, and they ended up not doing that. But it was still, this is a different spot, just a little tiny bit of water. And there's something about seeing elephants in the water that is just really neat. Here are some springbok in the road. And I don't think we were supposed to get out of the vehicles, but maybe we were young and naive at this point in the trip, and we said, whatever. And we got out and went down by the river, which was a really, really pretty spot, and just had a beer, took a break. But later on, we didn't do that. Okay, and we ended up back at our familiar campsite. Inihaha. And this was a really neat night setting up. We saw some wild dogs chase a kudu through the camp, and it was like 10 feet from us, and they were obviously in a pack and trying to attack it, and they ran off into the dark, and we didn't see if they got it or not, but it was just a really cool thing. Okay, so day 5, July 29th, this is our track for that. It's a long drive to the next campsite in Savuti. We started off at camp, of course, and these are some pictures from that morning. The sun coming up, and you can see we're right by the river there. We saw all kinds of game go by, and elephants in the distance, and giraffe was eating a tree like right next to us. It's really neat. This is getting ready to pack up the vehicle, which we got really quite good and efficient at. And we did a game drive on the way out of the park, a new area. There's a really beautiful kudu. But that game drive looked like this, along a different part of the river, going out of the park. And here's some pretty sable antelope, which we saw. Again, amazing horns on them as well. And this is an intersection pointing the way to the Goha Gate. But let me show you on the map where we're at here. So from our game drive, we continue on, and we exit the Chobe Park through the Ngoma Gate. That's that gate right there. And then on our way to the next gate, the Goha Gate, we pass through some small villages. This first one was Kavimba. Okay, not a lot there. We just drove through. It was kind of neat to see, though. The next village was Legathawana. And then the next one we went through was Kachaku. Okay. And that signpost that you saw a picture of was right here at this intersection. And this was a really rough road of sand, 12-inch sand, just two sort of ruts in the road, and difficult driving. But that's that spot right there. Here you can see what the road looked like. It's hard to tell from this, but it's a very difficult road to drive on. Oops. And then continuing on, we went through the Chobe Goha Gate. And even driving more to finally getting to our campsite, the Chobe Savuti campsite. We're down there to this right here is our campsite. This circular thing in the middle is where there's a building with you can take showers and whatnot there. And we got in kind of late, but we had time to go on a quick game drive. We started off at the pump pan. Some of the pans, which is where water is or it's dried up and doesn't have water on it, but it's where water collects. But some of the pump pans in that they pump water in there to try to keep the animals around. But we didn't really see anything there. And then we continued driving over to Quarry Hill and sort of went around this hill. And the terrain around there was very interesting. It looked like this, these sort of dried up, dead twigs. And it's around Quarry Hill that we saw this rotting elephant carcass, which was really disgusting and also really beautiful and fascinating. Okay, but that's all we had time for that night, so we head back to camp. And we cooked up some of that sausage on the grill with put some beer in there and beans and franks, or not beans and sausage, I guess. It was good. There we are eating. Ben became somewhat disgusted by this sausage, actually, the smell of it, and refused to eat it from there on. And he kind of spoiled me on it as well. So I think Bill was the only one that ate sausage after this. It tasted good at the time, but didn't want to repeat the experience. Okay, so day 6, July 30th, this is what our track looked like. We did a game drive along the large pan here. We ended up going really quite far south, all the way down here, before we ended up turning around because we realized we were way too far south. We didn't see anything down here, and really where we should have been is up here, where the pan is, where it was like a marshy kind of area, so it was wet, but we went down too far south where it was really dry. But some of the things we saw here, we see wildebeest, ostrich. Ostrich is amazing as well. They're really, really big, big animals. Very majestic, I think, and silly looking as well. Here's a stenbok. But we weren't seeing a lot of game on this game drive, and so we headed back to camp, and we decided we'd have a nice big lunch and then go out for a second game drive in the evening. So here we are, fixing up our lunch. We also took advantage of the showers and changed and just relaxed for a bit. Had a nice civilized meal, barbecue chicken, some wine, some beer. It was quite nice. And there we are, living the life, living the dream. The elephants here were incredibly brazen. They came right up to the campsite, very close. And I think the guys got a little bit too comfortable there because they are dangerous. But that was kind of neat to see them that close. Okay, so then we went out on our second game drive, and that looked like this. What we did is we went on the eastern side of the pan, although it looks like we traveled much less. We were smarter in where we went. So we saw some pretty giraffe there. And lots of beautiful birds. This was a really pretty spot, actually, down by the water in the marsh. Neat birds. It's always more impressive when you just see a lot of something. But we still weren't seeing a lot of animals here, and I think maybe we were spoiled by the Chobe River cruise. But that took most of the day, and those two drives, we headed back to camp. Along the way, we stopped at this little tuck shop that they had there, restocked on Windhoek, and you could see they sell such useful things as peaceful sleep there. I thought that was pretty funny. And we went back to the campsite, had a very light dinner that night because we had that nice big lunch. These guys were all over the campsite. I think these are hornbills. They remind me of angry birds, actually. Okay, but that was the end of our day 6. Day 7, July 31st. Our track consisted of this drive down to our next campsite, which was at Kwai. Okay, starting at the gate, I'm starting at the campsite, and we needed to drive out of the Chobe Park through the Chobe Mababi gate, which is there. Each one of these gates you have to check in, check out, pay park fees, etc. Okay, and then moving on. This was again really rough terrain, all sand, difficult driving. Ben did an outstanding job. This is the little village of Kwai and the actual gate to Moremi, which is the next park we're going to. It's just a short distance from there. The North Gate. Right there. You could see this river that we had to cross over. Had a pretty neat bridge, actually, that we had to drive across, this kind of wooden structure. It was kind of cool. Okay, and then the actual campsite is just to the right of the gate itself. So we were close to the gate. Right there was our campsite. So what we did is we set up camp, relaxed a little bit, got our campfire all ready to go for that evening, and then we went out on an afternoon. Oh no, we didn't go out on an afternoon game drive there. We ended up it was too late, so we just hung out, made some dinner, and did a game drive the next day. Nope, I take that back. Looking at my notes, and yes, we did go out on a game drive. I was like, it does look kind of bright there. So we did have time for a game drive. And this is what that looked like. It was all to the east of our campsite. and it was again along a river, so it was a wet area, which is great for game viewing, not so great for driving. You can see that we had to go in as far as we could and then back up, and a lot of dead ends and circular routes to try to get as close as we could to the water, and then coming back. So it was really pretty area though. And some of the things we saw lots of hippos, and it was really neat, and they would see us and splash down into the water, and they were fun to watch. We did see another lion. We got as close as we could to it. It was sleeping under this bush, and just kind of stayed there the whole time, not doing much. In fact, this is the spot right here that we saw that lion. We drove to that spot, and this little tree, that little bush right there, that's the bush that he was actually sleeping under. We saw these guys running. I'm not sure what they were running from, but they were jumping and running and got this great shot. Bill got this great shot of them mid-flight. Pretty animals. Beautiful zebra posing for us. Lots more elephants. Not as many as we saw up at the during the river cruise and along Ihaha, but still very impressive. Okay, so that was a good game drive, and we ended up back at camp for the evening. Made a nice campfire. Set up to cook some dinner. We had a really good system going at this place. At this point in time, you can see we got everything set up, got our firewood out, got our fire going. Ben's doing the cooking. Here's what we're cooking. We had 3 fillets that night, some curry vegetables. And the next day, day 8, this was our track for the day. It was driving to the next campsite, which is in Kakanaka, and this is the game drive that we did along the way. So it's only about 25 miles, but we actually ended up driving like 60 miles because of the game drive. So we start off here back at Kwai. The game drive consisted of this section here, where along the river, and this also was very wet. You can see we have these kind of like go in, come back as much as you can. So it was a lot wetter than it is here on the satellite, but we did that, and that took several hours. This is a hippo pool that we went by. There's actually an observation tower here where we stopped, and you can look out over the pool. It was pretty neat. Here we are driving on that game drive. Pretty bird. I think this is a secretary bird. There's the hippo pool, the hippo guy there. There were a bunch of them in there, mostly in the water, so that's about as much of them that you could see. And you can't really tell, but this is a tiny little miniature giraffe. It's like a little baby giraffe. It was a really cute little thing, like a little stuffed doll. Okay, so we continued on after that game drive. Then we just came inland a little bit more and just went a beeline there for the camp. Camp was Kakanaka, and this is as far as you can drive into the delta in Maremi without needing a boat. So if I zoom back here, you'll be able to see the delta itself, just how large it is. Okay, so we zoom way back there. I mean, you can see the borders of the country, and this is the delta, this whole thing here, the Okavango Delta, and it's just an enormous thing. And you can see that we're on a sort of finger there that goes up into it, as close as you can really get. So this was the most remote campsite that we were in, and it was nice. It was nice being out there. We were next to the water. This is actually water here. And there was nobody else was there. Was one other campsite that was there that had people in it, and so it was really just us. So there we are having a early dinner, finishing up the rest of the meat, the steak and the sausage, which Bill would eat. We decided after this that we weren't going to go large on the dinners and cook all this meat. Instead, we were going to get at our next supply stop, we were going to get canned food and things that were a little bit easier to cook. Elephants here were also very brazen, came right into the campsite. This is probably the closest we were to the elephants, and they were just ripping down trees to eat, which was pretty neat. Then we went out on our game drive for the day, which was this track here. And this was a very wet area, and it was somewhat frustrating driving around in here. Lots of dead ends. It took a long time to drive these little, this little bit, just starting and stopping, trying to find a safe path without getting stuck. Here's a baboon that we saw, a little guy catching a free ride. He must have got startled because he did look at us. Here's one of the enormous ant hills that you see all over the place. They're very impressive. And we saw a lot of terrain like this that was flat and the water just sort of coming up because you're on the edge of the delta here, and it was just really marshy and wet. And it was made for really pretty scenery. Okay, we ended up after that back at Camp Kakanaka. And at this point we were running low on supplies, running low on water, beer, food, the essentials. And so we ended up using Ben's water pump to purify some of the water. Our attempt to buy some from one of the more fancy lodges was unsuccessful because they wouldn't sell us any. But we did this, and I was the only one brave enough to actually drink after we used the purifier, and it was fine. I drank 2 full glasses, didn't get sick. It was yummy. And there was a beautiful sunset over the marsh that evening. And the next day, day 9, this is our track for that day. Long drive from that camp, Kakanaka, to Takadu, or Takadu. There was some debate about how you say that, but we started off early in the morning from our campsite. We took a little small detour to this place called Paradise Pools over here. It was dry at the time, so there wasn't much in the way of pools there, but we did see some animals, and mostly it was just a really, really neat, pretty spot. So we continued our drive out of Moremi through the south gate here. From there, our next stop was at the veterinarian control fence, which is this line going across the screen here horizontally. And at that spot, you need to get your tires sprayed, and you need to step on. You can see Bill over there is stepping on this little pad that has some kind of decontaminant on it to take stuff off your shoes. But we continued our drive from the veterinarian fence to Maun. Maun is a bigger city. You can see the airport there. And Bill had been at this airport once before to get a small plane for a safari. And so he knew where to go for lunch, and he recommended right across from the airport the Bon Arrivi restaurant, where we wanted to get a nice meal since we had been eating camp food for the past few days. And that's what this place looked like. It was a really nice little cafe out there, and we sat and had breakfast, and it was good. We also took advantage of being in a big city to resupply. We went to this little shopping center here, Choppies, and stocked up on food. Then continued our drive through a town called Ganzi. We didn't really stop there, but just drove through, and it was just another short 5 miles or so to the place where we were going to stay, which was the Fakadu Bush Camp. You can see it has a watering hole there, which was really neat because you could see animals there at night, and in the morning we saw them. But these are the 2 little buildings that we stayed in, Ben and I in one and Bill in the other, that were really quite nice. Here we are. You can see Bill's quite happy to be out of a tent and into a bed for a change, and these places were cool. That's the inside. I slept in that bed. Ben slept in that little bed in the corner again. Actually, we flipped fair and square this time, and fate just had me in the double bed. There were actually electric blankets here because it was really quite cold, and so that was nice. Kept us toasty. And this is the inside of the little lodge that they had where we could have dinner. We had breakfast there the next day. Full bar. It was nice. Okay, so the next day, day 10, August 3rd, this is our track for that day. This was a long drive where we crossed the border, you see in the middle there, from Botswana into Namibia. We started off the day on a game drive because the place that we were staying, Thakadu, is a private game reserve. So this guy just owns the land and has animals on it, and you can go on a game drive. This track here is the game drive we did, this sort of circular path that we took. He actually gave us this little map to go by, which was handy. And this is actually breakfast in the morning at the Thakadu camp. But on the game drive we saw various animals, including the eland, and we saw lots of other antelope that were similar to what we had been seeing. After the game drive, we drove to the border. The border post there between Botswana and Namibia. There's the Welcome to Namibia sign. And from there, these are long drives, we stopped off in this town, Gobabis, to refuel. There's the gas station there. Refuel, get some money from the ATM machine, etc. Just get out and stretch a little bit. And then continued on to our destination in Windhoek, home of the beer. And here we stayed at a place called the Olive Grove Guest House, which was really fancy, especially compared to what we had been staying in. This is the veranda. Bill's room is over there in the back to the right. Initially, Ben and I were in that room to the left, but they had us in a queen-size bed together, so we asked for a change, and we got, at least we were able to get two twins pushed together, which was a little better. It was down at the lower level. We were actually going to circle back and stay here a second night after we traveled through Namibia, so I have some more pictures of that place later. But that evening we walked just a short distance there to this place, which was Joe's Beer House, where we had a really nice dinner. Bill had a kudu steak, and it was just nice to be treated to some good restaurant food. Okay, and the next day, day 11, August 4th. We took this long drive over the mountains to Cesarium, which is our next campsite. Starting back at the Olive Grove, we went to first stock up again, more food for the journey and for camping at the Eros shopping center there. And then this terrain here that we're driving through is kind of like a mountain pass, and this is kind of what the terrain looked like as we were driving through. The roads were much better in Namibia than they were in Botswana. They were more of a hard-packed gravel than that sort of deep sand. So still rough going, but much better than in Botswana. Of course, we saw a lot of this along the way as well. Donkey cart is a mode of transportation. More of the road. Connie's restaurant. That was kind of fun seeing that. We ended up not stopping there, but it was kind of fun. And this is the Remhogti Pass, which is kind of like going down into some interesting sort of terrain there. This is it right here. You can see, get a sense of what it looked like if I rotate into 3D here. And you can see in the distance there the flat desert, and beyond that is the ocean. So we're going down through this pass and then going into the desert. But that's what that looked like, going down into that. Here's another picture of the of the pass. And here as well. So from here we continued on through this flat plain and into a really neat place called Solitaire. Solitaire consisted of a bakery, a cafe, gas station, and a general store. And it was just really neat. After all of that traveling through nothingness, you would come across this bakery, Moose McGregor's Desert Bakery. There were all these old cars, rusted out cars laying around, which was really neat. And this is the bakery. And they had this amazing apple pie there. That the book actually mentions it. It's like they're famous for this apple pie, so we definitely had to try that. This picture does not do justice to this apple pie, which was phenomenally good. Even Ben, who does not like apple pie, liked this apple pie. There you can see how the terrains change. We're checking the oil there, but more of a flat desert with the mountains in the background. Okay, so then we continued our drive towards Camp Cesarium. Across this terrain here is where that picture comes from. Desert on the right, mountains on the left, and this is the campsite at Cesarium. Cesarium was a much more well-equipped campsite, more on the U.S. sort of standards of camping, very accessible, lots of two-wheel drive vehicles there, weekenders camping, etc. And this is what our campsite looked like. We had a hard time actually positioning the truck just right so we could set up these tents underneath the trees, but we did it, and it worked out pretty well. Okay, so the next day, this is our track, and we're going into the desert now. You can see there's this cut into the desert which allows you to drive down there. This is about a 40-mile drive or so. And the desert, which is so beautiful and vast, and just to give you a sense of how big this is, if I zoom out, okay, this is the whole desert, and you can see just compared to the size of the country that the desert is actually quite large, and we only experienced a tiny part of it. In fact, well, first let me say that we got up really early that morning in order to drive in and see the sunrise, and so I'll show you some pictures of that. Here's the sunrise as we're driving down that cut into the desert. It's very pretty. So the terrain here is kind of a grassy plain with sand dunes sort of coming up. So not like the Sahara, which is endless sand, but sand dunes coming up out of the prairie, which was really kind of neat. And here's one of the sand dunes where you see people climbing up to the top of it, and you can get a sense of the scale here. If you zoom in, you see they're climbing up the ridge line here. And this is us going up Dune 45. It's a popular dune to climb up. And if I go back to the overview here, just to get a sense of the scale, this is Dune 45, the dune that we climbed up. So for us, it seemed like a really vast dune, but when you go back and look at the overview, it's just this tiny little speck. So we hiked up the ridgeline there, and this spot is where Ben and I sort of ran down the side of the dune. But here are some pictures from there. This was one of my favorite spots, one of my favorite things that we did. It was just so pretty, and the views from on top of the dune were spectacular. There's Ben at the top of Dune 45, running down the side of it. And so now we're walking to what's called the Dead Vlei. So we continued driving down this cut until we get here to the Dead Vlei. And the vlei is just like a pan, different words for the same thing. It's a spot where water collects and then dries up, and it's usually dry. But again, you can see like our path is quite small compared to the size of this thing, so it's quite large. And as you zoom in here, you can see these little dots. Those are all dead trees. Hundreds of years old these trees are. So let's look at some of those pictures. Over the ridgeline there is where we come to the Dead Vlei. And you can see that just from looking at the people that are down there, you get a sense of the scale of this. There's Bill, and these trees are really pretty and just stark, against the landscape. We decided it would be a great place to film a movie. The weather was perfect. Not too hot, not too cold. Okay, so then this is Sossusvlei. And Sossusvlei, we were lucky enough to see water in it, which is really quite rare. Only every few years you get this. So compared to Deadvlei, Sossusvlei was just a short distance over here. So this circular part is the Vlei, and there's this dune that Ben and I also climbed up and came down this side to get a view of the Sossusvlei from the top. So this is what it looks like before we went up the dune, and climbing up the dune. And here is the view of the Sossusvlei from up top. Very pretty, just so picturesque. Love being out in the sand in the desert like that. And this is Ben walking down the ridge line before turning left there and going back to Sossusvlei. And over on the right you can see another sort of dried up pan there, which is that. It's just such neat geography. It looks like Mars. Okay, so now we're back at camp. So from there we drove back to camp. It's kind of midday now. Had lunch. That was Ben cleaning up the dishes there. But from there, after we had a little lunch, we went to a short drive down to the south and around that mountain there, and to this canyon. You could see the cracks in the earth there, and this was called the Cesarium Canyon, and water cut through there. Most of the time it was dry, and it was dry when we were there, and it looks like this. It's a nice place that you can get out and hike around and walk down through the canyon. Here you can see how it's just a dried riverbed, and a river would flow through there when it was wet. Okay, so after that we went back to camp, had a nice dinner, called it a day. So the next day was day 13, August 6th, and this was a long drive as well. We left Sossusvlei and went to Swakopmund. Swakopmund is on the ocean, so we're going to be staying right on the ocean, which was really neat. But we started by noticing in the book there was this very small write-up of a winery, and there are only 2 wineries in Namibia, and so on the off chance that it would be worthwhile, we decided to check it out. So that's this little detour here off to the right. And boy, are we glad we did this. This turned out to be one of the highlights of the trip. It wasn't just a winery, it was just an amazing place. It's fed by 6 springs that create this really unique environment there that enables palm trees to grow and wine to be grown. Oh, that's actually something I haven't talked about. That was a really, really cold night, that previous night. That's Ben and Bill in their hats and gloves and drinking hot coffee. So this was one of the coldest nights when we were there. Okay, but here we are at the winery, the Nuras Winery. This is one of the springs. We went on this great tour of the winery, and it was conducted by this just really neat guy who's a PhD biologist and also a winemaker. And he does research at the winery on reintroducing wild animals into the environment, and is there with his girlfriend, they're both from Italy, and her mom has a winery, and so she knows about growing grapes. And it's just a really incredible, almost like a paradise on earth. It really was. This was one of the springs that's been terraced and made into a nice area. Other springs are kept natural so that the animals can come in and drink from them. This is the vineyard itself. Very small vineyard, only 3,000 bottles a year. Everything hand done. This is the hand press where all the grapes are pressed. Just a couple of barrels there. And we did a wine tasting, and it was really lovely. It was great cheese and crackers and wine after eating beans and franks for days. There's the guy, very charming, humble, gracious host. We were just really impressed by this place. Okay, so leaving the winery, we of course had to stop off in Solitaire again to get some apple pie. We got some apple pie to go, and then continued on this road. This was a sort of flat prairie type area that we drove across, and this spot right here is where we crossed. We pulled over to take a picture, but we crossed the Tropic of Capricorn, so that was kind of neat. And continuing on, we went through another pass. This one was called the Gaub Pass. So again, you're going across this like really flat terrain, but then you go down into these interesting little canyons. This is what this one looked like. You see mountains in the distance there. And there was another pass. Well, here's a picture of the Gaub Pass going down through that. We pulled over just to take some pictures and stretch a little bit of the flat terrain and the mountains in the distance. I really like this kind of terrain. I thought it was neat. This is another picture of what we're looking at here. Big roads there, big wide roads, but gravel, always kicking up dust. We actually cracked the window when one of the stone got kicked up. But again, much better than the roads in Botswana. Oops, this is for later. First, from the Gaub Pass, we went to the second pass, which is called the Kuseb Pass. That was here. A little less interesting terrain rise, but still, there was a bridge that went across the bottom there through that dried river, and it was pretty neat. Okay, the terrain started to change as we got closer to the ocean into essentially just a barren desert wasteland. It was pretty neat, but there was just nothing there. This is kind of what it looked like driving through. As we got close to Walvis Bay, towards the ocean, we hit a sandstorm. And that's what this picture is. And this was really neat as well, just driving through this, and just the diversity of landscape that we were experiencing was incredible. This is actually in Walvis Bay, and all of a sudden you have these palm trees and a sandstorm, and Bill kept remarking about just how much it looked like Saudi Arabia. Incredible. So that's as we drive through the desert here and get to Walvis Bay. We didn't stop there, we just drove through and then continued driving along the coast. And this was a really neat road because of the way the desert was on the right and the ocean was on the left, and the sandstorm was blowing across, and we could see ships out in the ocean just barely through the sandstorm. And this was more of a Sahara kind of desert where it was just dune after dune after dune of sand, which was really cool. But this is what that drive looked like after passing Walvis Bay. Ocean there with the sandstorm over top of it. And then that drive along the ocean. We were headed towards the Stilts. The Stilts was in Swakopmund, and it's called the Stilts because the place that we stayed were these little cabins on stilts in the water, or in the marsh at least, overlooking the water, which was pretty cool. So that's what it looked like. There were these little cabins sort of separated by this walkway, and these were really nice places. This is what the rooms looked like. They were pretty swank. The only thing is it was freezing here. It was windy, cold. Yeah, they had little balconies out there, but you couldn't really go out there. And there was really no heat in the room, but we did have electric blankets, so that helped quite a bit. But everybody had a view of the ocean from there, and it was just really pretty. So that night we drove into town and had dinner at the Lighthouse Pub and Restaurant. There's a big German influence here. So, for example, here we had Wiener Schnitzel and chicken schnitzel and Windhoek lager beer, and so that was kind of interesting to experience. Okay, but the next day, which was day 14, August 7th, this was the first day that we actually decided to do different things. So in the morning, Ben and I went on a boat trip, and Bill stayed back and walked around the town and walked out by the pier, etc. So in the morning, Ben and I went to Walvis Bay and went on this boat trip. So we got the boat here at this dock, and you can see our boat trip consisted of a sort of short journey through the bay. And some of the things we saw, this are some Namibian fishermen cleaning their oyster lines, and we saw these pelicans, which were amazing. They were so not aggressive, but really friendly, I guess. They flew very close to the boat. Of course, it may have had something to do with the fact that the guide was throwing fish to the birds, and they were sort of trained to come in for the fish. Not landing, though, catching the fish mid-air. It was really neat. Even though they're wild, it was almost like they were trained. It was quite cold out there, so we actually had to break out our winter coat gear. I had gloves and earmuffs as well at one point. But it was really nice being out on the water, especially after being in the desert. Just again, like a really neat change of terrain and geography. These are these special dolphins that only exist off the coast of Namibia and down to South Africa that we saw swimming alongside the boat. And this seal, there were hundreds and hundreds of seals there, but this seal used to be a seal that was in captivity, and even though it's in the wild now, it maintains its sort of relationship with humans, and so it'll come right up on the boat, and he feeds it fish, and it just behaves and puts on a show. It was pretty neat. Here he is with his hair scruffed up. That's a different seal. One of hundreds and hundreds of seals that we saw. It was neat. They all look like they're waving to us, but they put their flipper out in the water like that, out in the air, to warm up their blood. And midway through the trip, we were treated to some champagne and oysters and snacks on the boat, which isn't too shabby. Here's some pink flamingos walking and flying overhead. And then when we got back, Bill was sitting on the deck, reading the guidebook, planning our next move. And then we switched it up. So I stayed home. I walked on the beach and walked in town, and Bill and Ben went on four-wheelers. So they went four-wheeling in the desert, which was pretty fun, from what I understand. The thing I miss about it is I missed seeing the desert. So it's just these amazing pictures of the desert. It's so beautiful. There's the adventurers. Here you could see how the dunes just spill into the ocean, and it's just really, really neat. And this was from my walk. That's a pier going out into the water. It was pretty. And then we all met back up in Swakopmund and went to this place close to our place. We could just walk right there on the beach, called the Tiger Reef Beach Bar. Gabe actually recommended this place to us. She did a little online research and said, hey, you guys want to go to the Tiger Reef Beach Bar? So sure, why not? That's where we ended up. It was kind of an indoor-outdoor place, so it was still a little chilly there, but here we are with our Windhoek beer. That glass that I'm holding was a typical Namibian beer mug, and all of our beer was served in a mug like that, and so I ended up buying 2 of those to take home with me as souvenirs. And there's Bill with his wine. He usually opted for the wine. And we sat and watched the sunset, which was real pretty. And after that, we walked to the Kukis Seafood and Grill restaurant, which was in the middle of town. And there it is. Again, like just sort of standard German fare food. And we ended up back at the lodge for our last night there, our only night there. And then day 15, August 8th, consisted of this track, driving along the coast, cutting inland, and going to the Abadi Mountain Camp. Okay, starting at the beginning of the day. The lack of heat in this place at the stilts was interesting because we had breakfast there and it was inside and it was really nice breakfast, but it was, you could see your breath inside. It was freezing. So I don't think they were really set up for this kind of weather. Although we were having unusual weather. There was reports of it snowing in South Africa, which it hadn't done in like the past 30 years or so. So it was unusually cold. Okay, well, we started off by driving to the supermarket, stock up on things. That supermarket's actually where I got those 2 souvenir Namibian beer mugs. Then we hit the gas station to refuel and continued on along the coast. And the guidebook alerted us to this neat little destination, or a little side pull off the road sort of place where there was a shipwreck. And here you can see the shipwreck actually on the satellite photo here. So we drove in and took a look at that, and there's the shipwreck. Continued on to Henty's Bay. Henty's Bay is where we just ran around it. We didn't stop there or anything, but after Henty's Bay, that's where we make a sharp right and cut into the desert. So this desert road was, again, very interesting, and it was all slightly different, you know, but this was just a really flat, expansive plain of desert, which was really pretty neat. They were actually filming the next Mad Max film in the desert here, and we passed that, and Bill snapped this shot, even though it said no photography, of a Mad Max prop, so that was kind of cool. And we pulled over just to take a picture of just the flatness and the beauty, I think, of the terrain. No, Bill, you can't get back in the car. Well, okay, get in. And another thing that was kind of cool was in the distance you could see this mountain, and I looked it up, and this is the largest mountain in Namibia. It's called the Brandenburg, and it just springs up out of the desert floor, and there's really nothing else around it. Mount Brandenburg, Brandberg, and if you look at it on the satellite, you could see it's like this circular mountain that just comes up out of the desert floor. Really neat. And if we had more time, we could have gone there and gone hiking, and that would have been fun, but we just drove by it and appreciated it from a distance. But that's what it looked like from afar. Here's another picture of just what the road looks like. Nice and wide. So not that hard driving. And here's the Abadi mountain camp that we camped at next. Continuing on our road. The terrain started to change here, get more interesting rock formations. It's a little cloudy, you can't really see, but our campsite was here. There was a little lodge there where we could restock on beer. And then the thing to do from here is to go to the 12 I'm not going to be able to say this. The 12-Fontein World Heritage Site. It was Namibia's first World Heritage Site, and what they have here are these. It's kind of an outcrop of rock, and there are hundreds and hundreds of rock carvings here that are just thousands of years old, and it's really pretty special. This is what the rock outcrop looks like, and here are some of the rock carvings, really well preserved. Fortunately, we had a very lackluster guide on this trip who sounded like he really just wanted to go home, but you know, he took us to the rocks and we saw them, so the rocks spoke for themselves, I guess. And then we went to this place, which is called the Organ Pipes. And you can tell why. They look kind of like organ pipes. It was a really neat rock formation. That was just over the hill from here. We drove there ourselves. We didn't need a guide for that. But that's in this this sort of little canyon here. You can see that car parked there. That's where we parked. And you can hike down there and see the organ pipes. That was kind of neat. And then a little bit further south was something called the Burnt Mountain. And you can see from the satellite image that it has kind of this interesting colors to it, and apparently if you get there at the right time, when the sun is hitting it just right, it had all these neat colorful effects that it was supposed to display. But unfortunately, we got there just as the sun had dipped below the horizon, the mountain there, and we didn't really get any of the burnt effect, but it was still kind of a neat place to be. Okay, so then we went back to camp. And that was the end of day 15. Day 16, here's our track for that. We're traveling from Abadi to the Etosha Safari Camp. Another night of camping. Here we are in the morning, actually getting ready to close up shop. And it was another cold morning. Here's our morning ritual, toast, coffee, etc. So we start here at Abadi, and the guidebook was great because it would point out these little tiny obscure sort of things to go see. So one of the things, there's a short distance along that road called the Wonder God, which is really just a big hole in the ground. You can see the hole in the ground right there on the satellite image. So we figured, let's go see it. This is there we are packing up. But this is the road towards the Wonder God. It was just a short drive down that road, and there it is, a big hole in the ground. It was actually pretty impressive. We hiked down a little bit on this little ledge right here so that you could look straight down into the hole, and they say it's a collapsed cave. There we are. Don't jump. It's not worth it. And then the next place we went was the petrified forest, where there were trees that were millions of years old. We went on that little circuit there. There's Ben and Bill looking at one of the petrified trees. It's a tree. It's turned into stone. It's pretty impressive. These plants are actually alive, and they can grow up to 1,000 years old. This one was hundreds of years old, so that's pretty amazing. Unfortunately, we had a pretty lackluster guide on this journey as well, and the petrified forest turned out to be a little bit lame because it was something that you could easily see in Arizona or New Mexico as well. But still, you can't scoff at 6-million-year-old stone trees. Okay, so then we continued our journey after the petrified forest. We stopped at this little town called Ocho. Ocho was really pretty neat. You can see our tracks here are to the gas station, and to the ATM machine, into the bottle store to restock beer. And across the street from the gas station was this little bakery, this German bakery, which served amazing pastries. And we had lunch there, and it was really just a pleasant experience. And while we were sitting there, there's hundreds of school kids that walked by in their school uniforms, and that was really kind of cool to see. So we liked Ocho. That's where the Ocho bakery is, right there. But then we continued on to the Etosha Safari Camp. This is a place that had a big lodge that had dinner. You could eat there and whatnot. But we stayed in this part, which is just for campers. But you could see they had grass there. And so this is what it looked like. We got a nice campsite on the edge of the woods, but they had grass, which they actually watered and kept nice. So it was one of the nicer campsites that we were at. Okay, but after we set up camp there, we head out for a quick game drive. We got there a little bit late, but we figured we could do it. And we went through the Anderson Gate. And the Anderson Gate got you into the Etosha Park. And it was kind of an odd system that you had to buy a permit there, but then you had to continue on into the park and stop at this rest camp called the Akakuju or something like that, rest camp where you bought some other kind of permit there, and then you can go on. So Etosha is all about going to watering holes. Each watering hole is named, and it's such a vast area that the animals really just congregate around these water holes, and that's where your best chance to see things are. So the first water hole that we went to was the Okandeka water hole. And on our way there, before we got to the watering hole, we saw some of these jackals. We actually saw quite a few jackal there. This pretty bird, I'm not sure what that is. But then when we got to this water hole, the Okandeka watering hole. This is kind of what it looks like. It looks out over the Etosha Pan, which is vast, a vast dry pan. And we saw a giraffe there, and this ostrich. We saw a bunch of other stuff there too. And then continuing on, we went to the LeBron watering hole. And this one is an artificial watering hole in that there has a pump there, but it wasn't on, so it was dry, and we didn't really see anything there. And it was getting pretty late, so we actually started to head out now. But right close to the Anderson Gate, there was another watering hole called the Umbika watering hole. We did see some things there, but then ended up back at camp that night. This was another one of the coldest nights that we had there, was this night. But day 17 was when we were going to really spend some time exploring the watering holes. So drove back. This is what our game drive looked like for the whole day. This took all day to do this. And I'm just going to kind of quickly go through the watering holes here, because I know that Ben and Bill would appreciate just sort of backtracking over all the places we went. So maybe what I'll do is I'll just show all the animal pictures sort of at the end, instead of trying to pinpoint where we saw what. But this is the Umbika watering hole. The next one was the Nabroni watering hole. You can see how it works. Is there's a watering hole here, and then this is the sort of where you can park and get as close as you can. And we did see some springbok and oryx here. And then we went to the Gemsbok Vlakte watering hole. And along the way, we saw this pretty oryx. And these two little guys, I think these are impala, they were fighting. They were bumping their horns a lot. It was kind of fun to watch. And you're not actually allowed to get out of the vehicle in the park, and so, but there are a couple of places like this fenced-in area here where you could get out and stretch your legs, and we did that, took a bathroom break. And then right around the corner was the next watering hole, Olifantspad watering hole. From there we went to the Aus watering hole. And some of the things we were seeing, all these zebra were collected, hundreds of zebra at this watering hole. It's very pretty. Here's some red hartebeest coming down to the watering hole. And this is a dry watering hole, but was really neat because of the mineral deposits, and it was on the edge of the Etosha Pan, the big pan, and so you could really see out into the distance, and that was pretty neat. We went to the Homab watering hole there. Wasn't a lot at this one. And then the Sweda watering hole is the one that I just showed you the picture of with the minerals. So you can see, if I sort of tip down here, how we're on the edge of the Etosha Pan, and you're looking out over it and seeing all those minerals there. It was really neat. Then we went to the Cheritsab watering hole. And the Salvadora watering hole. And then we decided to take a drive on Rhino Drive, it was called. Not because there's rhinos there, we didn't see any rhinos, but it's this long southern horizontal road here through, not close to any of the watering holes or pan, just to see if we different change of scenery and see if we could see anything different. But in fact, we didn't. We didn't see anything on that road. But we went up from the south then to a rest camp, the Halali rest camp, and we had lunch there. It was good. We cooked some beans and franks in the parking lot there, and Ben had his little sandwich. It was good. It was a fun spot. And then there was actually a watering hole within the campsite, which was nice because you could walk to it. It was one of the few places that you could walk to, and it had this sort of viewing area that you looked out over this watering hole, and it was just a real pretty spot. But continuing on from there, we went to the Helio watering hole. That was, you can tell from the actual satellite, it was completely dry, so there was nothing there. And the water holes are really kind of hit and miss. You know, you don't really know what you're going to get until you go there. Some of them are dry, some of them are great and have lots of animals. This one you can see is also dry. The Nonimas watering hole. And then we went to the Ghost watering hole. And this one you could see we sort of viewed it from both the south and the north. And this was a great place because there was this really weird elephant there who was angry and stomping around and kicking up dust, and these kudu were looking at him like, what the heck is going on with you, dude? And he was big and mean, and this is a desert elephant, so the tusks on these are usually quite small because they use them to dig around in the mud, and that's why he's all dirty, because they dig for water. But he would charge these cars, and this one in particular, he got like charged and got 3 feet within it before he stopped. We couldn't believe that the car was just not backing up and getting out of the way. And he blocked the road and wouldn't let cars go by, and we had to wait until he moved off the road, and even then he was sort of challenging cars, and we just kind of sped past and got through. Okay, so the next place we went was the Etosha Lookout Point. And this is a point where you can drive out into the actual pan about 1/4 mile. So this is what that looks like. See that those sticks are sort of the road that goes out there. And here you just look out into this vast, it's kind of like looking into the ocean, but it's been completely dried up and there's no water there, and there's a mirage sort of in the distance there. There's Ben standing there in that circular part that you can get out and turn around. And I just thought this was really impressive because of the vastness of it. In fact, if you sort of step back and look at, well, this is kind of what it looks like when you're sort of out looking at it, the dried ocean. But if you step back and look at the whole pan from up high, you can see just how big it is. And if you zoom back even further to the entire country, you can see that it's big even compared to sort of on the scale of the entire country. But the pan, if you compare it to our track, you can see how little of it we really experienced, and that little part that you go that you drive out, this tiny little speck, you know, compared to the whole thing, but yet it's still very impressive to be out there. Okay, and then there was this these 2 grave sites there, which was weird. I'll show you where that is. There was this watering hole called the Rietfontein watering hole, and then on our way back out, we saw a bunch of zebra there walking by. But you take this little detour right here, and this spot right there is where the graves were. We never really did figure out why they were there, but there was one that died in 1955 and one that died in 1876. This one's that one, and this one's the 1955 one. So then on our way back, we hit a couple of water holes that we had already been at. The Salvadora watering hole, we went by that one again, and we went by the Sueda watering hole again. And at the Sueda watering hole, which was that one where all the minerals were, in the distance there, we actually saw a lion, 2 actually. But they were pretty far away, and again, they did what lions did, which was just sleep. So that's what they looked like. We stood there and watched them for a while, but they didn't even move their head. Our last watering hole was the Ondagab watering hole here. And it was getting pretty late at that point, so we had to make a beeline out of the camp. You had to get out by sunset. Back to, out of the park, back to our camp. And at the camp we saw another rare African cat, brave enough to come right up to us, and it was vicious, but we survived. And that night, which was our last night of camping, we went to the lodge and just had a really wonderful dinner. That had soup to start with, and then steak and dessert and wine and beer. It was a nice way to end our camping experience. Okay, so day 18 consisted of this track going from Etosha back to Windhoek, prepping for our flight down to South Africa. So day 18, August 11th, started here at the camp, and we went through the town of Ocho again on our way down south, and of course stopped at the German bakery, stopped at the beer store, refueled on both, continued on. Down south, we went through a town called Otjiwarongo, and we took a small detour here, actually kind of a big detour, took half a day about, to the Cheetah Conservation Fund. That was this little trek out here. And the Cheetah Conservation Fund is a place where they take cheetah and they either keep them if they're unable to be reintroduced into the wild, or they reintroduce them into the wild if they're able to. And we saw this demonstration about cheetahs where we learned about them, and they're amazing animals, and it was really a neat place. And we watched them get fed. Here they are eating their meat, and we learned that cheetahs actually eat only the organs of the animals they kill, but it's difficult to get organ meat for these animals in captivity, so they have to feed them meat and sprinkle it with this supplement that allows them to get what they would get normally from organ meat. This woman was great. She explained everything to us and was very pleasant, and there she is talking about the cheetahs. And they raise these dogs. These dogs are Anatolian dogs from Turkey, and they give them to the shepherds that have flocks of sheep and goats and cattle, and the dogs actually will bark and go crazy if the cheetahs are around, so that prevents the cheetahs from getting shot by the farmers, which is part of the goal of conservation. On the way out, we stopped to take a picture of this huge ant hill. These things are just so impressive. Okay, and then from the Cheetah Conservation Fund, we continued on down to Windhoek and stayed again at the very pleasant Olive Grove. This is the lower level where we had our meals, breakfast. This is the kitchen, which is this neat kind of open concept kitchen that they would be cooking for you up there and serve you from that kitchen, and you could go and get cereal and whatnot in them. Oops, that's something else. And then that evening we went back to Joe's Beer House, which we liked a lot, and had another good meal. This is where I finally was able to eat all the exotic game food, crocodile, kudu, ostrich, which was fun. Okay, so then day 19 consisted of this track, which is a flight down to South Africa. But we started off the day in Windhoek. We had some time to kill before our flight, so we went to downtown Windhoek and went on a walking tour. That's this little scramble around town. We decided pretty quickly that the walking tour was kind of lame, so instead we just hit various cafes, and this was our first one by this park, and we had really great coffees, cappuccinos, latte, and we had some pizza. They had Wi-Fi, so we hung out there for a while and just used that. This is at the next cafe. Oh no, this is the current, not the same one. And just to get a sense of how we all decided not to shave for 3 weeks, and I was starting to look a bit scruffy. And there's our best friend. But then it was time to go to the airport, so we drove out there, and this is where we finally got rid of our mobile home that had treated us so well for the past couple of weeks. Turned it in at the airport, and then took our flight all the way down to Cape Town. We were met at the airport and driven to the Cape Coddigan, which is where we stayed in Cape Town for 3 nights, I think. We didn't have much time. When we got there late at night, so we just hit the hay. And the next day, August 20th, again, these crazy tracks are just because we were stationary. But this is what the Cape Codigan looked like. This was the room for Ben and I. Beautiful place, beautiful, really nice place. It even had complimentary port, which Ben and I really liked, in the room. But the next day, which was day 20, this is our track around Cape Town. And what we did is we got on one of those double-decker buses that you can hop on, hop off. And our main goal was to go to Table Mountain, and that was the easiest way to get there. But along the way, this is our track with a double-decker bus through Cape Town. We had little earphones, and they told us about the history of the place, etc. But the thing that we really wanted to do that day was go to Table Mountain, and the views from Table Mountain were just spectacular. You take a cable car to go up to the top of it. This is kind of what the view looks like from up above. And you can see down into Cape Town. This island over here is where Nelson Mandela was held captive during apartheid. And if you look around the other side of the mountain, looking out the other way, you see these outcrops there are called the 12 Apostles. And you can see the shoreline there. It's beautiful. So here are some pictures of that. This is Table Mountain from down below, and here it is from up above, looking down at Cape Town. There you can see the island out there where Nelson Mandela was. You can see the cables over the left, how steep they get. You're almost going vertical as you come up in the cable car. That's the other side, the 12 Apostles there. Those are the 2 Apostles in the foreground. Just stunning views. We had a nice, beautiful, clear day. And this little furry guy, I forget what they're called, but they were all over the place up there. I don't know how they get there. They must be good climbers. And then the bus tour continued down along the beach. Those are the 12 Apostles there. And we really wish that it was warmer. It would have been nice to be in the water or down on the beach, but it was a little chilly. I mean, it was winter there in South Africa. And here's our beer flight. So what we did is after being on the mountain, walking around up there, we went down to the waterfront. This is the waterfront area. You can see the marina there in the center. And we settled down at this place called Mitchell's Waterfront Brewery, which is a neat place. We had lunch there as well. And we had our beer flight. They went from less alcohol to more alcohol. The highest one was 11% alcohol, and they were all quite tasty. And this is the dry dock at the waterfront where boats got washed and repainted. And we ended up our day back at the Cape Codigan. So the next day, we decided what we would do because it was going to be cold, wet, rainy, and windy. And it was our last day in country, and so we were going to do a wine tour. It was a good thing to do, even if the weather's bad. We started off, we rented a car in order to do this so we could be on our own. But we started off by going to University of Cape Town because Ben wanted to see the campus there. It was a really neat campus. You can see here how we walked around. And it's terraced. It's kind of on the mountain slope. And you can see the mountains in the distance. So it was a really, really pretty campus. In fact, they have this kind of neat 360 view that you could see how the campus sort of sits on the side of the hill. So here you could see the mountains in the distance, and here's the terracing, and then Cape Town in the distance there. It was a really, really pretty campus. And let's see some pictures of that. Oh, that's breakfast. Breakfast was really good at the Cape Codigan. Candlelit breakfast. But here's the University of Cape Town. It was really quite foggy and getting rainy there. But then we started our wine tour. the first winery we went to was called the Meerlust Winery here. And here's Ben and Bill going in and doing the wine tasting. This was a really cozy place with a really nice woman who gave us the wine tasting. It was really, we were the only ones there, and it was just very pleasant. The next winery was Ernie Els Winery, named after the famous golfer, of course. I didn't know that actually. But this is it, and this is a little bit higher up in the mountains, so it's a really pretty view from there. You can see in the distance the mountains. And here's what a picture looks like. It's kind of amazing to compare it to the Google Earth one. It's almost the same. But there's Bill and Ben going into the winery, and you can tell from Bill's crazy hair there, it was really quite windy, cold and windy. And there are some of the barrels in Ernie Els. And the next winery was just up the hill a bit, so this is one of the highest wineries that you can get to, called the Uva Mira Winery. And that's the view of the mountains. That house up there is actually the owner, and we're down here where the actual tasting room is. That's the inside of Uva Mira. And there's the wine. Ben actually bought a bottle of this. And the next winery was Tokara. And it was over the hill. Also very picturesque in the mountains there. And there's both a sort of delicatessen and a tasting room. Where we were, we actually went to the delicatessen, which is up north right here, and then down south. This part is where the winery is, in the tasting room. So we had a great meal there. It was a very modern place. These sort of floor-to-ceiling windows. But here's our meal. It was so good. The butternut squash and this amazing hamburger that I had with the fries. There's some cheese and charcuterie, tea. Great meal. Chowing down. So we were a little out of place, we thought, because we were scruffy and had dirty clothes and had been coming off camping. And the other people in this place looked a little bit more dressed for the occasion. But it was really a pretty spot. That's the view out the window of the vineyard. So the next winery we went to was Canning-Kop Wine Estate. And this had really good wine. But the place itself was not as picturesque. There wasn't really a view to speak of. But there's Ben and Bill going in Canning-Kop. They had this neat display of their really old bottles of wine. And those are the barrels. And there's the actual tasting. Yeah, we're getting happy. And then the next winery we went to, here's Ben and Bill going inside, is the Le Bonheur Winery. It was just some random one that we didn't really know anything about, but a couple of the other ones we tried to get to were closed, so we just picked this one and went. And it turned out to be nice. Ben bought a bottle of wine there. The guy was just getting ready to close up. We got there at like 5:30, but he said, "Sure, come on in. We'll pour you some wine." So we had a quick tasting there, and it turned out to be pretty good. So that was our last winery, and we ended our day driving back to the rental place, Avis, returned the car just in the nick of time, and got back to Cape Cod again for our final night. Okay, so the next day, day 22, August 15th, was the day we went home. So we got driven to the airport, and from the Cape Town airport we took our flight to Johannesburg. We had a 4.5-hour layover there. So we ended up eating at a really nice restaurant in the airport, and we're able to buy these really great Windhoek Lager beer glasses, which all of us were able to get. From there, the 15-hour flight home to the U.S. We went to our respective places, me being Indiana, and the last picture I have is taken from home, and just shows my return to civilization as I shaved it all off and got ready for teaching about 5 days later, jet lagged and all. So it was a really wonderful trip, and thanks to Bill and Ben for being fantastic companions, and I can't wait to drink that wine. Okay, thanks for watching.